Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about the pre-release Raichu that PSA graded, why I think you should stay away from this and everything else. But first, let's get into the backstory on that. Again, all these items, all these cards that are pumped up, that are hyped up, that seemingly don't have all the information available, they'll tell you, oh, we heard some information. We're a grading company, so you should trust us. Remember what happened last time with that, with the playtest stuff? Yeah, they were faked. And guess what? The same process seems to be used in all of these examples where they're going to trust the word of somebody. They worked there. They worked there. Why would they lie about it? Could it be that they're selling copies of it? Could they have extra copies that they're holding back? Maybe they want to pump this thing up. Maybe they want to make it worth more money. Maybe they want to cash in on this stuff. And I think it's irresponsible of everyone that is grading this stuff. If you want to provide start to finish information on what is available, what happened, what you know, who's tied to it, who has vested interest, I think that's fine. But look what happens. Look what happens, guys. And it's just the same train wreck over and over again where they want you to believe that this thing is authentic. Someone's going to cash in. Someone's going to make a bunch of money. The grading companies are going to compete with each other to see who's going to grade the craziest thing next. And guess what? It's at your expense. If you have any interest in purchasing any of this stuff, if you have any faith in these grading companies whatsoever, it's at your expense. My apologies, but you're the one that should be more upset about it than I am. I'm not buying any of this graded stuff other than the cards to crack for the binder. I'm not grading anything with these companies because I do not value their opinion. On the high end, they partner with fraudsters. We got a lot of that going on with this stuff. All this breaking edge, crazy stuff, test prints that ended up with some PFM research printed in recent years. So yes, even when Akabane put his name on it, you can't trust that. He had money to be made. He was making money. He cashed in. He almost certainly was part of the scam. Wow, who would have thought somebody would do that? So if you haven't seen the Protostoise stuff, it was a very similar situation. Again, PSA sat on the back burner at that point in time. They're like, oh, we don't want to touch that stuff. We don't want to grade the stuff that's unverifiable. Why would we do that? But it seems like they're dipping their toes in the CGC unverifiable water. And it comes back to burn them, reputation-wise. It comes back to burn the customers. And yes, a lot of these cards are extremely expensive, so the people that are purchasing them, people are going to be like, oh, who cares? They're gillionaires. They don't matter. Yeah, well, sometimes there's examples where you have somebody that trades their entire collection, somebody that saves up, somebody that spends a lot of money that they don't necessarily have a lot else going. Because if their true passion is Pokemon cards and their true grail is one of these cards, unverifiable cards, they can fall prey to these scams as well. And that's the people that we got to feel for the most. I mean, regardless, we shouldn't be letting any of this scammer shit slide through. And it's sliding through once again from the grading companies. We're not going to get into all the details on the grading companies and how they have screwed over the end user, the end consumer, the collector. But they have many times. And oftentimes it is intentional. Oftentimes it's working with people that they should know they shouldn't be working with. So for anyone that wasn't around for it, we had this bad boy. When was this? 4 years ago. We had this prototype Blastoise pop up. And it's like, everyone's like, what the hell? This prototype, this is a Blastoise card. It's got Comic Sans for font. Are you sure this is real? Are we sure we're not getting duped here? And I think we were getting duped to some extent. Again, unverifiable, not an actual release from this thing. And when you can't provide all the info and the info is not consistent coming from the people that are providing the info, it just shouldn't be authenticated. That's kind of what it comes down to. For anyone that doesn't know, WotC back in the day, there was a scrap table. We're going to take a look at a couple examples where you could pretty much make and do whatever the hell you wanted if you were in the right position at Wizards of the Coast. How many, and from the very get-go, even if this is real, how many exist? Surely no one's going to lie about the number that exist, right? The same way the playtest stuff, it's like, how does the playtest stuff keep coming out? Is someone still printing it? Did someone print it recently? Is someone trying to, trickle them out onto the market so they can get top dollar? And then all of a sudden, how many copies exist? Why couldn't CGC answer that? And why did CGC work with 2 known fraudsters on the playtest stuff? How? Not to mention all the other little clues that we had, where we had signed cards that were cut off, like almost like that was arts and crafts fest all over again. We've seen them do many of arts and crafts scammerini. All right, so here we have the bazaar guy. He was a little bit of a wiener baby, posting about. He was very upset that people would even dare question his proto-stoice. How dare you talk? It's clearly real, guys. You guys are all stupid dupids. So he says, I had the pleasure of talking with a former WotC employee for almost an hour in my card shop today. He shared lots of information with me, and it was a dream for me. We had a lot of small world moments, as we're both from Tacoma. So what are the odds? We're both in the same area. Spoiler, both of them ended up having copies of this card, this very questionable card. He told me a lot about what he did for Wizards, but also how they really let him down once Hasbro acquisition happened. He was not willing to go on record, as most Wizard employees would not. I feel very fortunate to have been given this opportunity. So it's Shell. The Shell BS, whatever the hell his name is. Turtles in a Half Shell. CHEL. And that's who he was talking to. Now we're going to get into it because the story changes depending on who he's talking to. And again, what you can't just trust just because they work there. It is not black and white, end of story. Their word is authority. If you want to include their testimony or their story about it, go ahead and do so. But there needs to be a name tied to it, and there also needs to be information on whether or not their vested interest is involved. Because it is, in this case and many of these other cases. The same with Akabane, the same with all of this stuff. And we've seen it, rinse and repeat. The same shit is happening over and over again with these new cool thing that we didn't know existed. New cool thing that we thought existed. But now, does it exist? And everyone is just so desperate for that cool thing to exist. They're going to share it. They're going to like it. They're not going to do the research involved. Someone's going to get burned on all of this stuff. Almost certainly. I received the surprise in the form of these images once I got home. He had a big part in creating the first English Pokemon set for Wizards. This is one of many, rough estimate 50. Alright, rough estimate. There's 50 of them? Are we sure? Press sheets that were, okay, 50 sheets. So how many are there per sheet? That were printed with the Blastoise prototype. You'll notice this doesn't look exactly the same as the ones James and I have, but there were many variations as the ones used specifically to find things they liked / didn't like in regards to developing the print of the cards. He's unsure as to when the yellow / gold border would have been added. His explanation as to why it looks the way it does is that this was part of the initial presentation Creature gave him. He mentioned sitting in a design meeting with their non-English speaking developer and it being extremely difficult, because they had to communicate simply by pointing at their collective computer screen's design software. I believe the Comic Sans font was an initial concept. Creatures had to appeal to American children, he couldn't say. So again, we're speculating here, a little bit of speculation. And then we saw that we got a prototype Blastoise hitting the old eBay. And you do a little bit of research, you do a little bit of digging, maybe you contact Shell, and you ask him what's going on with this card. So here his response to the Blastoise, the prototype Blastoise. Is the rules text the script type? Is the blue kind of faded? The corners should be a square cut and not rounded. So if they were made by CNETs and I was involved, but not a lot, they were a test for the foil printing process. There are about maybe 5 to 10 of them. Are there 5 to 10 of them? What happened to the 50 number? What's going on there? How's that going on? Now, the copy that was being sold on eBay, of course, the person providing the story here, Shell, had to be. You gotta secretly sell one of these on the market at the same time that it's blowing up, and that you gotta make the story better than it is, right? If you're selling one, you want to make as much money as possible. If you're pissed off at Wizards of the Coast and you just want to make some money with the shit that you brought home from work, you gotta tell a good story. So I reached out to Cardad-87 on the eBay and I asked him if it was Shell's card. He says this one, of the 2 from Shell, yes, and is one of 3 known cut copies of the card. In addition, there is an uncut test print sheet that contains a black bordered copy of this card. Basically, the lowest I would go on this card is $9,000. I don't even know how many of these exist at this point in time, but you get the story. 3 exist at the start. Oh man, these are my only chance to get these 3. Surely there isn't just a plethora of sheets and individual copies available everywhere, up and down. I am not in a huge hurry to sell the card, and if it does not sell for the price in the next week or 2, I will end up sitting on it waiting for close to $12,000. If sold now, I would rotate a lot of cash into stocking up my stores for Black Friday, so getting a bit less is fine. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense here. Again, everyone was skeptical, and they should be. Not that this isn't and wasn't produced by some equipment, by some employee at some point in time, but the important part is you don't know the actual story behind it. The people that made this thing back in 1998 do not remember the story either. You can ask even the employees that were directly involved with a lot of this stuff, with whatever you're asking them about. They're like, I don't know. It's been so long. And again, at this point in time, it was not the franchise that it is now. The monetary value was not there at that point in time, or they wouldn't be allowed to bring home, $10,000 Pokemon cards. Clearly. The same way that everything's buttoned down now. Yes, employees end up with cards. They do not end up with the early cards. That's all stolen stuff. They do not end up with the scraps. That all gets destroyed. That sort of thing. So if you need any proof here that Mr. Shell, he, again, they can print off whatever they want. They got a Sarah Angel here, and he put himself as the artist. He is not the artist of this particular card, but when you can print off your own stuff, when you can mess around with stuff, a lot of this stuff is going to exist. Does it suck that it's all tainted because it's all going to be with fabricated stories and everything else? Yeah, it kind of does. It's kind of a shame that stuff is going to happen. But you got to be very careful. So we've seen numerous copies graded by CGC. We see the bottom of sheets cut off here with 5. So if we were talking 5 to 10 copies, we got 5 right there. And then we got another 5 right there. And then we have like individual cards that have all been cut out, some with backs, some without backs. Be careful, guys. Be very careful. It's an absolute mess out there. So let's get into what do we have here? I guess we got one more copy over here. I haven't tracked down all of the copies, but again, it started off with something that no one had ever seen, and then people are gonna milk it, people are gonna cash in on it, and all of a sudden the quantity of those change, or even worse, with the playtest stuff, it ends up that they were printing them recently. CGC working with fraudsters. Shout out to Matt Quinn working with the fraudsters. Didn't want to talk about the fraudsters when I called him. He wanted to invite me to CGC for a hangout, for a tour, but he didn't want to talk about the known fraudsters he was working with. Weird. All right, here we go. Linktree before we get into the Raichu. We're going to go through the Raichu. We're going to go through the details on the Raichu, the lack of details on the Raichu, and why it is concerning. You should be concerned. You shouldn't touch it. You should not believe anything until more information is available. And even then, even when all the information is available, which it won't be, because that's not how this works. It's not mysterious anymore. And is it going to be an embarrassing amount of stuff that's available? Remember, PSA, both PSA and CGC have graded stuff based on the word of Akabane basically alone. Turns out he was part of a giant scam, which CGC probably knew about, in my opinion. All right, Linktree. Let's get through this real quick, so we can get into the pre-release Raichu juiciness. All right, PSA Pikachu Secure Card Shop Card Market by Ye. We got Catch 'em All collectibles. Spend 25, get 25. Collector app for tracking your collection. A bunch of discount codes for the stuff that I use and recommend. A bunch of stuff you can click. Affiliate links that you can click before you shop for the things you're going to buy anyway. It's the best way to support the channel. Truly appreciate everyone that's doing so. Truly appreciate Card Market. Buy your singles on there if you're in the European region. Singles are good. Stay away from the singles that are brand new, that are hyped up. Be careful. Probably got some content coming up with shill bidding. Be very careful with anything that has recently spiked. Be very careful. I know the FOMO is real. You're gonna think oh, I'm never gonna be able to afford this card ever again. But there are people that are out there to D ya in the B, and there are plenty of them. That's kind of why I have so much D in the B to cover on this channel that I'm not even sure which direction I'm going next. So here we have PSA card. Everyone posted, oh my god, did you see? Pre-release Raichu. They wouldn't grade this before. They wouldn't grade this before, even if they had an employee, a Wizards of the Coast employee, that could have shown them, could have told them any story in existence. They wouldn't have touched it. But now they got to touch it. I feel like they feel the need to touch it once again, because if CGC is going to grade this stuff, they're going to get all that press. They're going to get all that juicy press about pre-release. Oh, CGC will grade the pre-release Raichu. CGC will grade a missing ink error that was just a card that was laminated and had the lamination pulled off and it was just damage. They'll grade that. They'll grade. Send all your error cards. Send all your prototypes. Be careful with the prototypes. Be careful with anything that hasn't had an official release. Be very careful. Again, I don't know how many times we need to see it, that there's super secret information. I don't know how anything could have exploded, imploded, and then exploded again harder than the playtest stuff. And based on that, it's just like, are you gonna make the same mistake again? We're gonna do this again. We're gonna, full circle all over again. It's disgusting. I hate to see it. I don't understand it. I don't understand how anyone has any faith in these companies. I get it. People have money in it, so they have to blindly believe that, yes, the minimum wage grader that put your shit in plastic, yeah, they're the expert. We can call them professionals, at least, because they're making money doing it as their full-time job. Calling them an expert is, I think, doing a disservice to yourself and to anyone else around that might not understand what's going on over there. They say, just graded pre-release Raichu appears. Shockingly rare with a rumored print run of 11. Rumored? That's what we're going? We're going with rumored in the first sentence about this card? This fabled piece of Pokemon history eluded PSA encapsulation for decades. Yeah, because you wouldn't grade it. Because you knew better. Because you knew there was no official release for this thing, and there's no way to determine the real story behind it. I've heard so many different stories on this. I've seen so many fakes of this thing. It's just a regular Raichu with a stamp on it. So if someone manages to fake the stamp on it, guess what happens? We get the test print stuff all over again, but they didn't even have to reprint the cards. All they had to do was foil press a pre-release onto there. Emphasis on fabled, as it was mistakenly printed alongside the pre-release Jungle Clefable card. Oh my god. So that's also fabled? Because there's people that speculated on that. But again, anything that I've seen leads me to believe that that was also just not the way that it happened. This Raichu's claim to fame is its pre-release foil stamp, which PSA verified independently in addition to its provenance, which we traced to its original owner, a former project manager at Wizards of the Coast. Great, name them. Ask them how many they own. Ask them if they own this one. Ask them if they sold this one, with the pretense that they're going to tell a story to PSA to have it graded. Guys, please, just take a step back. Realize that this is not the shiny, cool thing that it should be. If it was in a point in time where it wasn't worth money, where it wasn't like an obvious cash grab, where it wasn't an obvious business ploy to keep up with their competition that grades things that they shouldn't, it sucks. It sucks because we have to doubt, we have to be more skeptical than ever on everything that's coming out of these places. That if Akabane is going to lie about it, who's to say that Jimmy John Johnson, or the unnamed anonymous source for this information, is not doing the same shit and has more of these and can sell more of these, can grade them with PSA, and they probably don't even charge to have them graded because they get to make posts like these where 121 people will like it. All right, we got Mike Boozer. So the story that I heard, and I think is the most believable, again, how many copies exist? How did it happen? Who knows? Does he even remember? So he wasn't like directly working with any of the production end of things. So how he got them, did someone make them? Was it an LOL gag? From what I can tell, it was an LOL gag where he brought them to an event. He had a handful of them in his binder. He was showing them to people and wouldn't tell them where they came from, how they existed. So again, like there could be 100 of these things. There could be ones that are fake stamped. There could be a whole nother scam deep down. I hope there isn't, but there could be a whole nother scam deep down like the Akabane stuff where we have people stamping these recently. For anyone that isn't familiar with the stamp, and then also like he got them, but then was it somebody else that made them and handed them off to him? And then he had a handful of copies, and then they had a handful of copies, and how many other people had a handful of copies? They had people pointed out to the sheet. They're like, oh, look, it's on the sheet. It must have accidentally been stamped. To my knowledge, that's not how it works. They cut these cards out. They stamp them afterwards. Which is still how it works. So, yes, it's next to each other on this. We got the starter deck stuff. Was this supposed to be a different promo for something else? Why would they have two pre-release promos? Two different pre-release promos? And then some of them existed, but they decided not to, but they stamped them anyway. Like, they don't need to see what the stamp looks like. There's not like a... And there's no... If you were putting the whole sheet in to get it all stamped at the same time, or all these corners, like, you're going to cut the cards first, then you're going to stamp the Clefable. So was it someone messing around at the facility that was like, oh, I'm going to have pre-release Raichus. That'll be cool. Maybe I'll bring them to an event, and maybe I'll be, like, mysterious about it. So God knows. Who knows how many of those were printed? From other indicators, we had these Charizards. Now, the story with these Charizards is important because this was done for an event. It's supposed to be a side event that was more of the collector end of things, where the tournaments were being played. This was stamped by the people that actually stamped the Pokemon cards, which was supposed to be allowed, then wasn't allowed, then was told, hey, you can't do that. So this is just a regular Dragon Majesty Charizard that has a stamp added to it later, and then was denounced by Pokemon. So again, there's a reason why none of this stuff has been officially posted by Pokemon. If it was true, if it was real, now they might not just come out and make a statement to make somebody's cards worth more money that worked there in the past that probably isn't supposed to be selling that, or it's at least frowned upon that they're selling the stuff. But you would think that they'd be putting on, like, they do a show. They do a museum type scenario where they put this stuff on display, tell you about the origin of it, that sort of thing. That's where, like, the real, rare, crazy history, that sort of thing would end up. Now, was that all kind of mixed and matched and kind of ruined by Wizards of the Coast doing their own kind of thing, where they were allowed to bring stuff home? Saw the same thing with the disco sheets. The disco sheets got brought home. Heard stories from people without vested interest saying that their dad, not their dad, but their friend's dad, brought it home from work, cut it up, gave it to the kids, that kind of thing. It was just scraps at that point in time. But how many scraps do they have? How many scraps? How many Protostoises are just kicking around in a basement, in Shell's basement? If he has a basement. In his attic, if he has an attic. In his bathroom, if he's got a bathroom. Anyway, just be careful with all of this stuff, guys. Again, anything that's purposely vague, anything that's leaving out key details on something that shouldn't be authenticated just based on someone's word to begin with, it gets dicey. And it's going to get dicey again. It wouldn't surprise me if we have another giant scam in either the Protostoise or the Raichu. So be careful, warn others. See you next time. Join the Discord. Bye.